Emily Chung, owner and mechanic at AutoNiche, or owner on Operator. Emily is a proud mom of two energetic boys. She owns and operates AutoNiche, a family-friendly auto repair shop in Markham. She's a licensed automotive service technician and automotive writer and with various publications. She also teaches in the Automotive Business School at Canada at Business School of Canada at Georgian College. Emily holds a degree from the University of Waterloo in psychology and business, and her previous job includes psychometrist and human resources associate. She's appeared on various media, including breakfast television, Cityline, and the Marilyn Denis Show. She is passionate about her work together with her staff. AutoNiche's purpose is to bring better communication and client service to the auto repair experience, to the auto repair experience. Emily, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Really, really good. So I wanted to just kind of jump right into it.
Okay.
Tell us about your journey into the trades and how did you end up in this career, in your career?
Okay, so as you can see probably from the bio that Brandon was reading, there's a lot of stuff that I've done. So being in the trades is my second career, so they say. So when I graduated at the university, I became a psychometrist, was in HR, became a project manager. So I did my corporate jobs. And then when I was on mat leave with my second kid, I decided to pursue a pre-apprenticeship program at Centennial College. And at the time I was working for my father's company, and he actually sells parts wholesale. So he sells to the people that I buy from now. And I thought that, you know what, it would just help me learn a little bit more about my car, learn a little bit more about the industry if I went into trade school for level 1. And I figured in my head, I was like, well, I'm on mat leave anyway, so I don't need to take extra time off work. Why not? Like, how busy could it be, right? Taking care of an infant and a toddler at the time. So I decided to go to the pre-apprenticeship program. And then after that, around that time, actually, I became a Christian. And then after the program finished is when I really felt like God was calling me to open up a repair shop. So I decided that, you know what, if I'm going to call myself a Christian, I was going to follow it, right? So I basically made the decision to not return to my dad's place and then to start up a shop. So I did it differently. I had my level 1, I started the business, built it up, went back for level 2, 3, eventually challenged the exam, wrote my ticket, got all that done. So I totally did it the other way. Like usually you have technicians licensed for a while, then they go start their shops. And yeah, that's just how my journey ended up.
And for folks who are listening, what is a psychometrist? I don't know if I'm...
A psychometrist?
Psychometrist, sorry.
Awesome. Okay, psychometrist. So you know what you guys have heard of what a psychologist and psychiatrist is. And a psychometrist are the people who do all the testing. So like those surveys that you get, like, what do you like to do? What don't you like to do? Like those kind of surveys. Or, I would give blocks to people so that they would have to manipulate it to give me the matching image. I would do a bunch of surveys from anywhere from neuroticism to pain inventory to intelligence, aptitude, all that. And the psychometrist basically puts all the data together and comes up with a report. So for me, I was working for report recommendations for people going back to work and different programs. And I always say this, that, cars are the same, right? I'm documenting conditions, I'm documenting symptoms, and I'm trying to diagnose a car. It's kind of the same, except that the vehicles don't talk back. It's like, it's awesome. So, there's lots of related things that I've been able to use from my background in psychometry into the vehicles as well.
That's interesting. Okay. You said in past conversations that gender isn't an issue until you make it one. Tell us more about that.
So this is what I say, and this is what I firmly believe, is that if I don't make gender an issue, then it's not an issue for me. So I'm not at all saying that there isn't like barriers and there isn't issues out there. I'm just saying for me, whether I can or can't fix a car has nothing to do with my gender. Whether or not somebody chooses to react a certain way because they may have biases against my gender or whatever, or even that's their choice. It's not me. So for me, when I started in the trade, I was a little bit, older in life, like 28. Usually apprentices come in quite younger than that. So for me, when I went into trade, I just was very aware that I was not going to make gender my issue. And if anybody else chose to do that, then that was on them. But for me, that wasn't it. And so it really helped me, because anytime I came against a struggle in terms of the vehicles, right? If I couldn't do something or whatever, it was never an automatic thing for me to say, well, I can or can't do this. And even when other people have stereotyped me, let's say, or they've given me pushback because of my gender, it's been very freeing to be able to separate myself from that, because you know what, in my mind, it's not an issue. And so I never give myself permission to make it a thing. And I don't give other people permission either.
Well, so some people have the mindset that a crisis is an opportunity. How have AutoNiche turned the COVID-19 pandemic into an opportunity for business?
Okay, so I'm going to say what I'm going to say. And you have to understand too that for us as a business, it was tough. We did lose a lot in sales. And of course, it was unexpected, like, just as with everybody else in the world, right? So having the reality of that sales are down, that, cars are not coming in, that we're all, trying to navigate staying safe and all this, there are still many opportunities that we've been able to take advantage of. And I have a team meeting with my staff every week. And I said at one point, we're not going to let this opportunity go to waste. We're not going to let this pandemic opportunity go to waste. And so a few examples are, one is that we stayed open throughout. So we were stage 1, and we said that, like, it's different, right? So we were able to establish safety protocols with the grace of people going through it with us, right? So we had, the physical distance and the shields and all that. Like, we kind of went through it at the beginning where everybody sort of was trying to figure out their way. When you're in stage 3 now and you're opening up, it's almost expected. You need to know, you got to have all your ducks in a row before you can open, right? And so the pressure is there, and there's just not as much grace. It's like, if you miss something, people are on you about why you're not. Whereas at the beginning, we kind of grew with it, if that makes sense. The other opportunity is we got to learn about how to keep ourselves safe very early on in this journey. And then, the pandemic really did slow things down for us, and I think for everybody else. All of a sudden, people were not in a rush to get their cars back. We had more than enough time at the cars. It's so weird, because we're used to, people drop the car off and they're like, okay, I need it back by this time. Then I need to go shuttle, my kid here and do this and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, it's like nothing. And they're like, yeah, keep it for 2 days. Or like, okay, so we had that. We also had the opportunity to talk to people about maintenance on their cars. People are not interested in buying new cars so much now, right? They don't want to get into a whole term of payments. And so we're talking to them about, this vehicle, if it is going to last you for 3 years, here are some things that you need to do. The fact that people aren't traveling a lot and they're doing more road trips, like, it's an opportunity wherever we choose to look for it, if that makes sense.
It does. I appreciate that. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but how much should someone who owns a car budget each year for their vehicle maintenance?
Okay, so we say at about $1,200 a year, $1,200 to $1,500 a year. So about $150 a month, depending on what vehicle you drive. And it really doesn't matter what vehicle, like, even if it's a brand new car, you're still gonna have those costs. And so we say, to budget for that in maintenance and repair. The interesting thing about the industry, and Brandon, you and I hadn't talked about this before, but data shows that, the cost of repairs and maintenance increases, as you would intuitively think, right, as the vehicle ages. And it hits a high, usually at about years like 8 to, let's say, around age 8. That's where the repair and maintenance cost, it kind of builds up to year 8. And then we find that data-wise, it tails off a little bit. Yet what we're finding is right around that age, 8 to 10 years, that's when a lot of people want to dump the car. They're on the track of, well, I've been spending a lot, and they don't see that hill over, right? So it's really interesting. If you're planning to keep vehicle long-term, to keep that in mind, that you're really building into the car, right? And you're gonna get a little bit of a payoff at the end, right? Before you let it go. And another fact that a lot of people don't realize is, for every model year it's expected to be on the road for 29. I think the average model year is 29 years in Canada. Okay, so that means a 2000 Honda Civic, 2029, we would still see it on the road. Okay, so I think a lot of people, they're not aware of how long cars can really last for. So if you want to make your car last, whether it's a brand new car or an older vehicle, we usually say budget anywhere from $1,200 to $1,500 a year.
A lot of the folks who are, calling in or listening in rather, are coming from a trades construction background. Can you talk a little bit around, from a unionized perspective, what are the differences between the mechanic industry compared to the construction industry?
Okay, so my industry is very interesting in that it is not unionized to the extent that the construction sectors are. There are a few shops that are unionized, and certainly when you get into, so I have a 310S. If you have a 310T, that's a heavy duty vehicles like truck and coach, they are more unionized than we are. So the fact that we're not unionized means that we get to buy our own tools, we get to figure out our own training, and we have less of a structure than, I guess, what a unionized environment might be like. So there is a big difference between, in terms of, tool-wise and training-wise. Having said that, there are some places, mostly the larger dealerships, where they are providing the tools for you. So you don't necessarily need to spend a lot of money on your toolbox. You can just go in. Now, having said that, if you choose to leave, you have nothing, right? So that's sort of the pros and cons of them providing the tools versus us having our own tools. And the other thing I would say too is that, I think just very briefly, I think mentioned to you about this before, but I love automotive because it has all the trades on 4 wheels, right? We have electrical, plumbing, we have heating, we have mechanical, like on 4 wheels, it's all there, right? So, but yeah, that would be the biggest difference, I think, between the unionized environment and what we have.
If someone is on, listening for the first time, whether it's now and never really, or after the call, and never really thought about mechanics, can we talk about the money a little bit? What is the pay rate range for a level 1 mechanic?
Okay, so a level 1 technician really can start at the very beginning. So that would be, if you have no skills and you're starting at level 1, it would be minimum wage if you had nothing. Typically we see apprentices go through levels, 2 and 3, and by the end of it, you're probably, at just under the $20 range an hour. And then I see your next question, which is, what is pay rate for licensed tech? So licensed tech, it really does vary. You can have anybody from like 40,000 to 120,000 or higher, depending on their skill. And a lot of shops will pay per job, right? So what they call a flat rate based system or performance-based system. So they're paid by the job. There's pros and cons to having compensation that way. It just really depends on the work environment as well as the person and the employer. But it can work well both ways depending on the person. I would say though that the biggest demand in terms of skill for apprentices or licensed technicians nowadays is their diagnostic ability. So if you're great at diagnostic, then you will have no problem commanding whatever rate you choose.
Good to know. What are the pros and cons for a mechanic working for a dealership versus an independent shop?
Okay, so great question. Let me think about this for a sec. Okay, so the pro of working for a dealership is everything that you would expect it to be, right? You have, big corporate, you have usually newer vehicles that you get to work on because they are still coming back. Once they're out of warranty is when the independent shop sees it. So you have newer vehicles that you work on, you have all the factory tools, you get the factory training. I would say though that one of the cons is that generally speaking, they are quite competitive within their base because a lot of them are this performance-based system. I have heard from other technicians who work in the dealership world that it is that competitive nature, right? The other thing too, my concern about technicians at dealerships is that you only see the one product. So you can look at that as a pro or a con, right? You're either really, really, really good then at that one product, or you can look at it the other way, which is that you're not as proficient across the board. And so diagnostically speaking, it's more of a challenge, I think, for dealership technicians because they really only know that one product, right? And so when I take them out of that product and I put them, you know, on an independent shop where we're diagnosing all sorts of vehicles, then it's a different step for them, if that makes sense. For an independent shop, the great thing is you get to see everything. You get to see really, truly, like when the vehicles break down, we see them, right? Or because they're usually about at least 3 years old, 5 years old coming into our shops. And then, yeah, a lot of the pros is that diagnostic wise, you get more variety of work, you get more variety of skills. And then the con is that there is oftentimes in an independent shop a lack of structure. And a lack of, you know, factory training, a lack of access to information, that kind of thing. So it really depends because even in the independent shop world, there's such a huge range, right, of types of shops in terms of quality and proficiency of shops too. It's different than a dealership where, you know, if you had a Toyota here and a Toyota in another part of the country, you're expecting they're going to be at about the same in terms of training and tools, right?
I'm gonna go a little bit off script. Traditionally, when someone goes take their car to a dealership to get fixed, it's usually a bit more money. Um, could one then assume then a mechanic at a dealership is making more money than a mechanic at an independent shop?
No, because dealerships have way more overhead oftentimes, right? So the door rate that you see posted is not the paid rate to the technician, nor should it be as an owner, right? I'm saying it's not, that's not how it should be. So you're not seeing the true, I guess, pay rate for a technician if you're working, you know, there. I do say this, that for apprentices who want to get into the trade, I strongly believe that they should go into an independent shop because really that is where your skills are going to be honed out. You know, oftentimes at a dealership level, it's, you know, they see the same product. So what happens is when they have vehicles that come in with the same problem, right? The technician is more and more likely then to jump to, okay, it's that issue, rather than diagnosing and proving it all the way through. And so whenever I talk to an apprentice, I'm always trying to impress upon them to get into the independent side because as a technician, your skills will develop differently than if you were in a dealership. And then it's interesting that you bring up that point too, that people believe when you go to the dealership, it's more expensive. And I'll tell you, like, there are times when we are more expensive than the dealer. Yeah, it's not always based on cost, right? It's based on, like, we want a fair pay for the amount of work that we're going to do. So, I mean, you could argue too that dealerships, a lot of them could, because they have volume, that they could, you know, discount away certain things. So then they end up being cheaper, let's say. But I always say this, you know what, if it was so easy to find a shop that you could trust based on what you're paying, then easy, we would just all be the cheapest ones and you can trust us, right? So, but unfortunately, that is not the way how it works, right? And so it's not always about the pricing.
Okay. When you started AutoNiche, you mentioned you tried appealing to women. Can you talk about that and what ended up happening?
Okay, so if you're ever in Markham, then come by my place and you will see that in my radius alone, there are hundreds of shops. There's hundreds of these, you know, very small 2-bay, 2 parking spot shops. It's very saturated. So I really felt like, so the unit that I started the business in faced the main street, which is Laidlaw. And I just needed a way to differentiate myself. I needed a way, I thought, that I could have somebody, you know, take a second look at our shop. So on our frontage was AutoNiche, obviously the logo, and then it said Women's Auto Repair Service. So we ran with that. And after year one, we noticed that about 85% of our clientele were men. So as a business person, I'm like, okay, we get to figure out why this is happening, right? Because it was totally not what I was expecting. So we asked the guys. And it was interesting because the feedback that we received from the guys was that they felt comfortable coming in. So they're walking into this building. It says Women's Auto Repair Service, right? And they felt comfortable walking in because they didn't feel like they were expected to know anything about cars. And so, you know, usually we'd meet the guy and then we would meet their spouse after for the, you know, next few visits and so on and so forth. So it was really encouraging because, you know, as much as women, lots of women say this, right, that they feel like they're taken advantage of because they don't know anything about a car. And truthfully, there's a lot of guys out there who are in the same boat. They're just not as vocal about it. And so it's interesting to me, right? Because for me, like, I mean, there's a bias, there's an opposite bias for guys where they're expected to know something about a car just because they're guys. And that's just equally as ridiculous, right? Because, I mean, it's like the bias of me supposedly knowing something about kids just because I'm a girl, right? Like it doesn't happen that way. So bias goes both ways. After year one, we decided to then change the marketing to family friendly because we realized that, you know what, we were attracting, you know, families in. And then one more thing about that point is that, you know, we realize that in families, there is a division of labor. Like you cannot do everything. And so usually we find in families, the guys are responsible for the cars, services, and then the women are usually responsible for whatever else. So in my home, it was, you know, grocery shopping. And I think I gave you this example before where like 6:30 in the morning, if I'm registering for kids programs online, I can bet you that 85% of them are going to be the moms doing it. Like that's just the way how a family traditionally or generally speaking splits the role. It's not because the guys are better at it. It's just this is how it's divided. So that's been our experience at the shop level.
Okay. What are 3 tips you would give people who are looking for a good mechanic for their vehicles?
Okay, so tip number 1 is to start with something small. So, you know, the book I read says that if you're faithful with small things, you'll be faithful with much. And I think somebody had put that in the chat as well. And so start with something small. So start with an oil change, start with a tire change, like, you know, where you can get a sense of how they are. Because if they're not faithful with your car, with the small stuff, why in the world would you give them more money, right? So we always say start with something small. The other thing I would say is that you get to trust yourself in terms of whether or not you feel comfortable in that place. And so a lot of times people tell me, oh, you know, they don't know a lot about their car and they don't know, you know, they feel like they need to know more to feel more comfortable. And I'm thinking, you know what, guys, like I feel the same way when I take my pets. I have 2 cats now, right? I take them to the vet. Like I have no idea. The cat looks the same going in, coming out. Like, I don't know. Does it need the blood test? Maybe. Like, you know, the things still, my cats still seem fine. And so, but I don't feel like I need to know everything about the cat world just to feel comfortable about my vet, right? Same thing as investments. Like I have RSPs or whatever. And so do I need to know everything about the stock market? No, like I have some sort of ability to sense and to know and to have that rapport with the person I'm dealing with. You know, do I have peace about it? And if I don't, then I don't. Then we're good. We move on, right? So that's the other thing about finding a good technician. And then the other thing too is, you know, when you're going in to find a mechanic, it's actually, I just did a Facebook post about what questions not to ask your mechanic. And so I always say, you know what, don't ever ask them what they would do. If this is your car, what would you do? That's such a common question. Don't ask it. Because if somebody asks me this question, I'll give you the example. It's totally different, right? I go to the shop every day. If this car breaks down on me, I'm good. Like, right? I can fix it myself. And then, I have different shuttle cars I can take too. Like it, right? So the question really should be, you know, what would you do if this is your lifestyle? If you have the lifestyle where you have to go from A to B like all the time and you can't have downtime with the car, or you have that lifestyle where you're driving long distances all the time, or you're doing a lot of short trips, like, you know what I mean? Like that's sort of more the conversation that needs to happen with the technician. And then one other last thing I'll say is there's a myth out there that if you don't drive the vehicle a lot, you have less maintenance repair costs, and the opposite is true. If you do not use your car, The more it sits, the more maintenance and repair costs you're going to have. And it's similar to our bodies, right? Like Brandon, if I ask you to sit still, don't move for like even 30 seconds, you're going to start feeling really stiff and you're going to need to move, right? Our bodies were designed to work, and same as a car, it's designed to work. You're still on mute.
Sorry, thank you for that. That was really, yeah, I really appreciate the thoughtfulness in those answers. You're an advocate for positive mindset. Can you talk about what this means?
Okay, so I was not always the way that I am now. Even a few years ago, I will tell you, I would have told you that I was a realist. So that's sort of the background of where I was at. I'm an advocate for a positive mindset because I just so firmly believe that, you know, you can get so taken down by your thoughts. You can be taken out of the game just simply by what you think. And so for me, in my experience, I've had enough of that side of things that I now choose to move into a more positive mindset. When I'm in a positive mindset, I can create and I can move forward and I can shift and I can do all these things that I'm not able to do when I'm stuck in a negative or a pessimistic or anything else. And it's a challenge, right? Because you can't get through 2 minutes of CP24 without feeling totally bummed about something. And so it is definitely a challenge. However, the payoff is really good.
When did you begin using a positive mindset, and what was the reason for this?
So for me, I started using it maybe in my 30s, somewhere around then. And the thought process at the time was, you know what, I've lived my life for 30 something years doing things a certain way, and it's brought me to here and I'm not satisfied. And so then I started thinking, you know what, I just started reflecting back on sort of the things that have held me up and what would move me forward. And then of course I went through a lot of different coaching and I went through a lot of different just practical stuff, right? Really putting to work the things that I learned. And then now, like, here I am. And so I'm sure that even in our call, you can hear a little bit of a difference in terms of, you know, the words that I speak and the presence that I have. And the thing about positive mindset is, like, I'm not at all saying that we ignore the reality of the situation or the negative side of the situation. I'm just saying that we get to choose how we frame it so that we can move forward. Does that make sense?
It does.
And I don't know, do you want me to go through that quick example of the nervous and excited part?
Please,
Yeah,
please.
okay, just for context for some people. So Brandon and I had talked about this before, but, you know, I wanted you guys to think about, okay, when you're nervous about something, you know, what is it that you feel physically when you're nervous? So I don't know if you guys, if you're okay, if you guys want to unmute or if you want to put in the chat, like, physically speaking, what is it that you feel when you're nervous or hesitant or afraid of something?
Could you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I have something ringing here. I tried to get into apprenticeship for cars, and I realizing it kind of interrupt with the work I do for serving my church, because I do a lot of prayer and Bible study and street preaching. So it kind of, I realizing I can't put that thing away from the things I'm doing and pursue the apprenticeship for fixing cars. And it's hard for me because I don't know which role should I choose. Should I serve God or should I make the money? And I always think, like, what should I do?
So, Hung, just a second there. That's definitely something that we can talk about, like, at the end of the call, if that's okay, because that's a great question. That's sort of what I had gone through as well. But for right now, I had posed a question about when you feel nervous about something, like, is there any, do you have any, what are the physical symptoms that you feel? So I know that Michelle was saying that her stomach was clenching. And Hong, for yourself or anybody else on the call, do you guys have any other like physical symptoms that you feel when you're nervous?
I just look at the Bible and I don't feel nervous after. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Okay.
it.
So for me, so Brandon, you and I talked about this too, right? When I'm nervous, I feel like same thing, Michelle, like stomach clenching. Also, like my heart starts racing. Brandon, I don't know. I forgot what you had told me the last time.
I got like sweaty.
Sweaty palms. Yeah. Sweaty palms, and then my mind starts to go. Like my mind's racing. Right, I'm thinking about this and the other thing. So that's when I'm nervous, and then when I'm excited. So when you guys are excited, what are the physical symptoms? Like, what does your body feel like when you are excited about something? So for me, it's a lot of the same symptoms. Like if I step back and I think about it, it's a lot of the same when I'm nervous or excited. So when I'm excited, my mind's also racing, my heart's beating, sweaty palms, totally, right? Stomach starts to go. So the physical symptoms are the same, and they've proven that out as well. The only difference is what your mind chooses to tell you that you feel, right? And it takes some time to adjust and to get used to saying to yourself, I'm excited, when really all you want to do is just run away from the whole thing, right? So that's what I mean about shifting from a negative to a positive mindset. It's not at all saying I don't feel nervous. It's saying, giving validity to what I feel, and here's what I'm choosing to do with it. So Brandon, I hope that makes sense.
It did. It does. It did, and it does.
I'm consistent.
You are consistent. Can you give an example doing a rough business situation when you've used a positive mindset to get through?
I've had many rough business situations. So one thing, I can give you an example of is, there was a time when I had less than $1 to my name, business-wise too. And you have to appreciate that, I was employing other people, had my house on the line, still have it on the line, less than $1 to my accounts. And it was incredibly nerve-wracking. So, I do this whole process to get myself, shifting. And basically what I do is I write down, all the stuff that I'm thinking negatively. And then I think about, okay, well, positively, what is it that I could say about the situation? So for a lot of people, they have less than $1 to their name. It's easy. It's so easy, Brandon, to go through all of the negative stuff, right? How am I going to make it? I'm not going to pull this through. I'm a total failure. People are going to blah. Like, I mean, I could go on, right? There's so many things you can say there. What people have a hard time with, and what I had a hard time with when I started, was thinking of the other side. So, you know what? I had less than $1 to my name. Well, guess what? One, I am a Christian. So, I get to see how God is going to move here for me. Right. And I choose to figure this out. And yes, I have $1 and I have another day. I have another minute to work on something, so I choose to, I have an opportunity to, blah, blah, blah. Like all of those sentences really help me reframe the problem. And another thing too, actually, that we didn't talk about before, was that I do my best. Okay. I look at the situations as if I'm playing a long game, and I think you already know, I said this in another slide a while ago, that like, I'm a big Raptors fan, right? So I love the game because it's so much like business and life. It's incredible. They have 24 shots on the clock, 24 seconds for each shot, right? And whether you hit that shot or you missed it, you only have like less than 24 seconds to celebrate and then move. You got to keep shifting and moving and shifting and moving. And it cannot stay in your head. You cannot celebrate that shot because you're now on the defense, right? Or nor can you kick yourself for missing the shot because you got to get back. So it's just, every challenge that I come up with, I really do my best to think of it in the long game. Right. And so that keeps me from completely rolling over and giving up on some days, if that makes sense.
No, I appreciate that, and it does. You said that there's two ways to make change: one from the top down with policy, and one from the bottom up. how we behave in the workplace.
Yeah.
Please elaborate.
Okay. So what I mean by this is I firmly believe that there's two ways you can influence change. You can either do it top down with policy. So, here's our policy procedures, all this contractual stuff. Or you can do it from bottom up. So you can do it but in the way how I behave in the workplace, in the way how I demonstrate who I am in the workplace. And for me, I am more about the bottom up, right? And so when I talk about, the barriers, and I mean, I've been asked this question before, because it seems like sometimes when I talk that I'm not recognizing that there are barriers or there are challenges in the workplace. And for me, I'm just of that mindset that we have people who are going to take care of the policies and procedures. And while that's all happening, I'm still on the ground. I'm still working. I'm still coming up against the barriers and the challenges and the whatever. So I get the opportunity to figure that part out. And for me, when I walked into trade school, for example, I was one of 3 females in a class of 40 in level 1. When we got to level 2, 3, I was the only one there, the only female there, sorry. And so I made it very clear in my mind that I wasn't going to change anybody's opinion about whether or not I should be there. I was just going to go and learn as much as I could and do the best that I could. And so for me, it was really about my character. Whenever the prof asked if somebody wanted to do something, I was right on it. And so the guys knew over time then that I was there for the exact same reason that they were, to learn. There were some people, of course, who were completely, how do I say this politely? They were completely not appropriate, okay? And you can take it as far as you want in terms of what you think I mean. And for them, I just was not interested in changing their mind about whether or not I should be here. And it didn't matter what kind of policy and what kind of procedure, that I have, right? In terms of gender equality and work and like whatever, to me, I'm not interested in that. And I say it like this, when you're in heated argument with your spouse, right? Does it ever work when you stop and you say, hey, you know what, 15 years ago, we signed this, you're gonna love me no matter what, sickness and health, da, 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 da. Like, and then does that ever stop the argument, or does that ever, calm down the argument? Like, to me, that I've never actually tried it, but I can't even imagine that it would work, right? So I just don't naturally go to policy and procedure. I naturally go to, here's the space that I'm in, I get to control what happens with me, and here we go, and here we move,
Okay. You mentioned you have 2 boys. Do you talk to your children about positive mindset theory?
I have 2 boys. They are 12 and 14. One of them is sitting right in front of me right here. I don't talk to them about the theory. I do it with them. And it's not always successful, as I'm sure some of you can understand if you have children. However, I do try to make it an opportunity whenever I can to walk them through, okay, here's the fact of the situation. What is it that you're thinking about it in terms of a negative state? What is it that you're thinking about in terms of positive state? And how do you choose to move? Another thing that I know I mentioned to you, Brandon, privately was, this whole cost, price, and benefits thing, right? The idea that, so from a young age, I've taught my kids that, what they do is a choice for them. It's not necessarily who they are, but it is a choice. And the good news is we get to make choices again the next day, right? If you pick chocolate ice cream today, you didn't like it, great. Next time you can pick vanilla. Like, it's not good or bad, it's just a choice. And I remember talking to them about, with every choice, you have prices and benefits that you pay. And so just talking them through, I think helps them to, I hope, you'll have to, we'll see how they turn out in a few years. But just being able to have the conversation that what they do is a choice and is not who they are, right? Because sometimes we get so tied up about, well, this person said this, so therefore this is who they are. Right? When in reality, those are the words that they chose to use. Whether or not that's who they are, I don't know. I need more time, right? So yeah, I do practically do it with my kids because, they say like, oh, you can't teach. There's certain traits that you can't teach people, right? That's what they say, and honesty, integrity, work habits, all this stuff. We say like, oh, you can't teach them those kind of things. And in my mind, it's always interesting because I'm curious, like, at what age do we actually start measuring those things, right? If we're saying that, okay, when people come into the workplace and they're not job ready because they don't have the soft skills, well, I mean, I'm measuring that at age like 18, let's say, right? And so to make the assumption that we can't teach it, I can understand why the statement is there. I guess I'm just thinking maybe that's not always true.